So Ozzy Osbourne passed away this month. And I'm not normally affected by the passing of a celebrity whose art I enjoy, but I don't actually know him. For example, Tom Petty, I love. Lemmy Kilmister from Motorhead, love that band. I was saddened when I heard of them passing, but it didn't sit with me like the passing of Ozzy has. And so I wanted to tell a little story about that, how I discovered his music, and why I keep listening to it even today, even though, my day job, I'm a chief operating officer at Catholic Answers. People think Ozzy, he's the crazy guy, devil worshiper that bites the heads off little animals and stuff. And I think maybe he's certainly crazy. I wasn't trying to, I've never looked to him for any sort of moral guidance, but he seemed like as he got older, he became a little less mysterious, a little less frightening. And certainly his kids seemed to love him very much. And and he was married to his wife for, 50 years or something. So there must have been some redeeming qualities about the man. But like I said, I enjoyed his art. I didn't know him personally. So when I was a kid, I grew up in a little mountain town in Southern California called Running Springs. And the bus used to drop us off at this big dirt field. It was right below Nob Hill, which is where I lived. And I remember finding a little white tape cassette on the ground, and it just, it had gravel and stuff stuck all over it and everything. And I thought, oh, what is this? So, I picked it up and I brought it home and I cleaned it off and I put it in my tape deck in my room, and I was listening to it, and I was just like, it was rock music, but it was not like any rock music I had ever heard before. My parents listened to like the Beatles and Neil Young and Jimi Hendrix and stuff like that. But this was like on a whole other level. It was just different kind of music. And I was drawn to it immediately. And I had no idea who it was on the tape cassette. And one day my dad came in my room and he heard me listening to it. And I don't remember telling him that I didn't know who it was, but he said, oh, that's Black Sabbath. And he knew the song Iron Man, even though he didn't listen to the band at all. And I was like, yeah, Black Sabbath. This band's badass. So anyway, I kept listening to it and just really fell in love with this tape cassette. And I found out, I know now later what the tape cassette was. It was a compilation album called We Sold Our Souls for Rock and Roll. Classic title that the band didn't pick, by the way. It was the record company that did a lot of that stuff. A lot of those things that they got in trouble for were actually the idea of record executives who were just trying to sell albums. So anyway, fast forward several years, and I was working at a Mexican restaurant. I was a prep cook during the day, and so my job used to be to prepare all of the stuff that they would need for all day and into the evening. So I would make, first thing in the morning, I would make chips and salsa in a deep fryer. And right next to the deep fryer was a 6-top stove, gas stove. And we used to make refried beans in these giant pressure cookers. And all the pressure cookers had like a little meter on the top. And so while I'd be in there cooking the chips and dumping them into this big container, I would have to watch the little gauge on this pressure cooker. And so when the needle would get up into the red, you would pop the little it was like a pressure release valve, and it would let out pressure and until it got out of the red, and then you would close it, and then you would adjust the heat, turn it down or whatever, because the goal was to try and keep it at a consistent temperature for several hours to completely cook to make refried beans. So anyway, for whatever reason, the meter on this thing was not working. And I'm in there cooking chips and I'm looking at it and I'm monitoring it. And I didn't really think anything of it. I don't know. I was a stupid kid, I guess. And, but the meter hadn't moved. And I was listening to that tape cassette, the one that I found at the bus stop several years before that. And the last song on side one, I remember this well, it was NIB. And which is a great song, a weird, very misunderstood song. But so I walk out of the kitchen to go flip the tape cassette. So there was a kitchen where the line was, and then there was a prep room in the back. So I walked out of the line, out of the doorway into the back where the tape deck was, and I went to go flip the tape over, and all of a sudden, boom! Huge explosion. The pressure cooker had exploded. There was refried beans everywhere in the kitchen and chunks of metal all over the place. I could have been probably killed or even disfigured from this. I mean, it was just an unfortunate accident, but it's kind of funny. I tell people to this day that Ozzy Osbourne saved my life because, like I said, I would have been messed up pretty bad if I had been in that kitchen when that thing went off. I mean, I was literally standing right next to it making chips, and I walked out, and just as I'm flipping that tape, that thing just exploded, and it shook me to my core. Stuck around the rest of that day to help clean up all the refried beans that were everywhere. And, and that's just one of many stories. I have tons of Ozzy Osbourne stories. One of my first big concerts that I went to with my friends was Ozzy Osbourne at the Irvine Meadows Amphitheater in California. I think that was probably in 1988, maybe 87 or 88. I can't remember. It's so long ago now. But it was a lot of things like that. And, the thing that a lot of people misunderstand about that kind of music and just that whole scene, I'm talking about like this heavy metal music in general, is that from, Ozzy and Black Sabbath was already kind of an old band when I was a teenager, They were like classic rock almost. But the scene was the same. It was sort of like a gathering place for disaffected youth. Kids who didn't feel like they fit in anywhere suddenly found a home, and so it was like that for me. And I had all these, good friends, and that are people who I'm still friends with to this day. I'd give the shirt off my back for any one of them if they were ever in trouble. And it all goes back to music, and it all goes back to, for me, and me starting to get into that music was really with my introduction to Ozzy Osbourne, because I found a tape cassette all dirty and forgotten at a bus stop. Anyway, fast forward some years from that time. In about 2006, I decided that I was going to become Catholic, and I started working at Catholic Answers 2 years after that. And I remember I was going on a fundraising trip with my boss, because we were trying to raise money to build a new studio for Catholic Answers Live, which is our radio program that we produce. And we were at someone's house, and it was a pretty festive function. There was a pretty well-known priest there, and somehow we got on the subject of music, and I had mentioned that Black Sabbath was my favorite band, and he looked at me without any humor at all, and he said, "You are going to hell for listening to that music." And I was a little struck by that, I'll be honest. I mean, I know that Ozzy Osbourne has a reputation among Christians especially, but I think, like I said at the beginning of this video, that I think he's misunderstood. So anyway, and also I don't want to make the priest sound like he was some sort of judgmental jerk or something. He's not. He's a good man, and he just had my best intentions in mind, and so I'm not gonna judge him for that. And I think, he could be right on some level if music affected me. I think people have to discern these things for themselves. And for me personally, I have two things going on. One, I don't, and I'll just give you an example. My wife will put on a song, here or there, we're just chilling at home on a Friday night or something, and the song will be over, and she'll say, "Weren't those lyrics beautiful?" And I'll be honest with you, I have to respond and say, I'm sorry, I have no idea what that song was even about. I don't listen to music that way. I'm listening more or less to the overall sound of the thing. And I don't know really how to describe that. It's difficult to articulate, but that's how I listen to music. And so I don't really dwell on the lyrics. But that being said, the first thing I thought in my mind was, well, which song am I going to hell for? Because, for example, like War Pigs is about how rich people always make poor people go out and do their fighting for them. Or, the song NIB that I mentioned, that's sort of like a weird love story about the devil who falls in love with a human woman and then becomes a good person as a result. So there are weird, Iron Man, like that song's just like a weird sci-fi story. Um, I don't know, Into the Void. That song's about people who are tired of all the fighting and pollution and everything on the planet, and so they get in a spaceship and they take off for some world that's like, I guess, a hippie's dream or something. I mean, none of these things it's not satanic, it's not evil. There's not like, they do have, if they are open to criticism on that score, I will say probably there are songs about drugs. Sweet Leaf is about smoking pot. Snowblind is about cocaine. I love the Beatles also. And they have tons of songs about drugs. And no one's ever told me that I'm going to hell for listening to the Beatles. So anyway, I think, I guess what I'm trying to say here is that, you kind of have to discern these things. But also, if you're a Christian and you meet somebody who is, into things that you wouldn't approve of, I would say probably telling them that they're going to hell is not the best approach. I would probably not do that. As a matter of fact, I never have done that. I never will. I will never tell somebody that they're going to hell. I don't even really talk about the danger of hell, even though it's there, it's obvious, it's apparent in the Bible and Scripture. There is a hell, and there's probably people in it. Otherwise, I don't see why Jesus would have spent so much time in Scripture telling us about it and warning us about it. That being said, I do believe God is merciful, and I do believe that everybody on the planet needs God in their life. But they're not going to hear us if we are, if we say things that back them into a corner. And so by telling somebody that because of their lifestyle, they're going to hell, you're backing them into a corner. And I think a better approach would be to really work on yourself and try to live a good, holy life. I'm not saying I do, but I think everybody knows that I'm trying. And even though I fall short in all kinds of ways, and, thank God for confession. But at the end of the day, I really do love Jesus, and I really am trying to follow him to the best of my ability. And maybe not everything I do is perfect, or maybe it doesn't seem perfect, but I could tell you right now, music does not affect my relationship with Jesus. For one, I have a pretty good filter. I don't really pay attention to lyrics that I disagree with. Otherwise, that record collection back there, I'd probably have to get rid of almost everything in it. I'd have like 2 records left. One of them is a speech that a pope gave. I can't remember which one. I have some old-timey record. Shout out to Rob Martell for picking that one up for me. An atheist buddy, by the way. My atheist friend, one of the metalheads that I've known forever, by the way, was at a record store somewhere near where he lives in, I think, Arizona. And he saw a copy of that, picked it up, and shipped it to me in the mail. How rad is that, man? So, and this is from a crowd of people who grew up and supposedly like heavy metal kids don't like religion. They hate religion. I don't know, man. Like, my friends and I, we didn't want to have anything to do with religion, but, but we weren't 100% against anybody who was into religion. I had friends who were Christian when I was young, even though I wasn't into that, and I was an atheist. I have friends all over the map, and I can tell you that none of them would appreciate being backed into a corner. And so I have always tried to, when I do talk to people about issues pertaining to the Catholic faith, I usually wait for them to start it, which is really easy for me. For example, I go to a party and I'm just sitting there and somebody says, "So what do you do for a living?" That opens up a whole lot of conversation, and I always have opportunities to evangelize for the faith. And I think that's important. And I guess in closing, I'd just like to say that sometimes there are things in your life that affect you in strange ways. And maybe that explosion was divine intervention, or maybe it was just a really insane coincidence. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you, although I do think probably God had a hand in that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here doing the work that I'm doing. And so God can, through all kinds of means and all different kinds of ways find an in, if that makes sense. And thank God he found an in my life, because I don't know where I would be right now without God. But I also am really sad that Ozzy Osbourne is gone. And I don't know what the state is of his eternal soul, but I can say this for sure. Thanks for the music, man. Anyway, that's all I got to say on this, I guess.